Welcome to Divine Decode, where ancient wisdom meets modern awakening. I am your host, Pragya, and today we journey into the emerald soul of Ireland, a land woven with myth, memory, and spirit. Joining me is Niels, who is a sacred guide who leads a woman through transformative rites of passage across Ireland's mystical landscapes. His work bridges Celtic earth based spirituality with the deep psychology of personal transformation. Together, we'll explore how the land itself can guide us through the thresholds of our becoming with courage, grace, and deep remembrance. First of all, thank you, Niels. Thank you for being on our show. It's an honor to host you today.
Pragya, I'm so happy to be with you and with the audience of Divine Decode. That was quite an intro. I hope I can live up to it.
You surely do, and you surely will. So, Niels, when I was actually reading about you and knowing about you, so your work, it invites people into direct relationship with sacred Irish sites, places like Tara, Uisneach, or Bóinne. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. But where the ancient and eternal seem to meet. I'd love to begin there. How do these landscapes themselves participate in the transformation? Can you walk us through it?
Yeah, and don't worry about the naming of things. Irish names are really difficult. I am an outsider to this island, to the country of Ireland myself. I've been graciously taken in by the people and by the land, and after 12 years, I still struggle with the original pronunciation of the old sacred site that dot the Irish landscape. Ireland it's special. I think that everybody over the whole world has this weird magical connection to the land of Ireland, which is almost above and beyond what could be expected. I mean, it's a tiny, tiny island off another island off the main coast of the old world. So it is located in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and as far away of everything as is possible. It's literally the edge of the world. And you get that feeling when you're here that it is a really different country. And that comes back in all kinds of ways. The most obvious one is when you're talking with the people. When you're here on the land, it just feels different. But the most clear way that this becomes evident is when you are actually walking her hills, her sacred landscape, and are doing a ritual at the old forgotten sacred spaces. That's when it really starts to stand out that this place is a little bit different than any of the other places. And Pragya, I might confess, I've had the great fortune of doing a lot of spiritual work all over the world. And I was completely taken by surprise that it is on the land of Ireland where somehow the land itself is most potent. Now, I'm not saying that there are no other very great power spots across the whole world and that you can have incredibly deep experiences in other sacred spots across the world. But the land of Ireland itself is just on another level. And I have some theories of why that might be, but before we dive into that, just to finish off this point, I really do think that Ireland itself lives large in the commons of the imagination of all of the peoples around the world. There is something about this island that we all feel and know, and we're not quite sure why. So we'll leave it at that for now, and we can dive a little bit deeper and see where you want to take this.
First of all, thank you, Niels, for such a roadmap, and I truly am, flabbergasted by the information that you've given, and I truly believe in the theory of transformation, and how these beautiful places, they speak for themselves, and they speak as if that land, it has a voice. I really want to know that you often describe your journey as initiations and not retreats. So that phrase, it feels both powerful and a little provocative. So can you throw emphasis on that?
Yeah, when we are on the spiritual journey, I'd say we all get to a place in our lives where we need something a little bit more, a little bit deeper, a simple affirmation, a simple meditation, a simple couple of days retreat will not just do. We all go through these phases in our lives where we need something with a little bit more oomph, a little bit more power behind it, a little bit more intention even. That this time I need to change more radically. The life that I've been living until now has been fantastic in what has been able to give me, but I feel that the life that I have created until now is starting to become too small for my being. My being is starting to really ask for more. And for those times when the life that you've built is starting to feel a little bit too cramped, and the only thing that will really do is massive change, not just in the outside world, but specifically of who you are, your belief systems, your identity, how you are showing up in your life. That kind of change, so inner massive change, that kind of change needs more than just a retreat or a vacation at some beautiful sacred sites where you get a nice snapshot for Instagram that you post and oh, it was so fantastic, but basically you spent the whole time in the tour bus and didn't really get to interact with the land. So those, now, not really downplaying, because honestly, for some people, that's the only chance that they get when they come, for example, to Ireland or do a sacred site tour in any country. But there are times that you need more. And then you really go into longer periods of time that you set aside for yourself and you go like, okay, I am this person now. I feel that I can no longer keep on doing what I'm doing. My soul, my spirit, the whole person or being that I am is crying out for something more to come through. But my life is just not there, is not mirroring that or offering that opportunity to express in that way, in that bigger way. So I'm going to go from the place that I am right now, and I'm going to put some time aside to specifically go through that change through a ceremony. And I like to call that a rite of passage. It's an old term that we'll go into in just a bit. To go through that rite of passage, through that longer ceremony, and come out at the other side now in a new way. And these are, again, for those really big changes. Think about, for example, when you go from one phase of your life to the next. For example, this might happen with a divorce. This might happen when you become a grandmother. Or you feel very specifically something bigger is knocking on my door. And usually that is of a spiritual sense. And then you really take time aside from your ordinary life. You go into something that is called liminal time and liminal space. Liminal is I think a Greek word or a Latin word that means something like threshold or in between. So it's a sacred in between time where you're no longer in the old, you're not yet in the new, and you are creating for yourself that new way of being. And that is a rite of ceremony. That is that longer thing that you're doing. That's not just a retreat. And honestly, a sacred landscape is fantastic to do this in. So it doesn't have to be, for example, Ireland. This could be anywhere where there is a sacred spot. Now, for the Irish, those sacred spots could be anything. They were, of course, the tombs of their forefathers, the great passage tombs of Noth and Douth in the Bóinne Valley. They had, of course, also their stone circles and their standing stones where they did huge amounts of ceremonies, and it's still happening. So Irish spirituality is still alive and kicking. It is a living a tradition. That's where they had their big ceremonies. But also they went to those clear breaks in the landscape. Those were also seen as holy. So, for example, caves or lakes or rivers or mountain ranges, anything that was a clear distinction or break in the landscape which would create, again, such a threshold or in-between space. A liminal space would become a sacred space. And what we are doing, and this you can really do anywhere, but in Ireland it just flows really nicely with all of these sacred sites that dot the landscape, is we are taking that idea of, in our lives, we are taking a couple of days out of our normal lives to go into liminal time and in between time to make that change. And we are doing that in cooperation with those liminal spaces in the outer landscape, so that we are fully embedded in a kind of cocoon to fully step outside of your normal life, outside of normal time, and outside of normal space. And that's where we do our ceremony. And if you do it in that way, very consciously, and there are multiple ways that you can work with the land, time flies. It's completely different. You are amazed about how much work you can actually get done on the inner plane when you're combining liminal time and liminal space. And the impact is also just different. This is something that you will not forget. It's not just, like we said, another snapshot that you're making if you are going on a sacred site tour, if you will, and you're taking some snapshots in wherever, and you go like, oh, I've been there, tick that off the bucket list. No, if you're doing real ceremony with your intention, this is for me, I am taking the steps to change, then that makes such an impression, Pragya. You become literally a different person, and you will never forget those ceremonies, those places. It will be with you for the rest of your life. As you can tell, I get passionate about this subject.
I truly get it. I truly get it. And I'm so sure that it is actually so effective, and it's so reflective in itself, I love how you've given the framework and how you've actually explained the phrase. So thank you so much for that. And I truly believe that the listeners, they also resonate with it, because I truly do. And I totally get your points where, this is not just something that, you can speak about on top of it, the boundary of it. Thank you for going deeper, and I like how passionate about you are about it. Also, one thing that I really, really appreciate about you is that you work primarily with women, uh, and women who are walking through new life thresholds, who are stepping into leadership, motherhood, elderhood, or, simply the unknown. So basically, you support women a lot. And when women enter these rites of passage, what patterns or awakenings do you see unfolding? Because we talk about women health, men's health a lot nowadays. And this is something that I really want to know more about.
So let's go into that. Me and my partner, we both work specifically with women, and it's an enormous privilege. And my partner does that from the female perspective, and I do that specifically from the male perspective. And it is actually we're making use of the very natural dance that happens between a man and a woman. Now, let's be clear, we're not talking about any romantic interaction, but there is a very natural way of holding against or towards one another, where one is very receptive and the other one is far more guiding. And what I do specifically with women, and that comes very natural to me, I've grown up in a woman household, and it's just, I'm very comfortable with holding that kind of power and direction and guidance, being the calm, collected roots giver, framework giver, within which somebody can change. So what we tend to do is get rid, first of all, of any belief systems that no longer work, that hold you down or hold you back. And That can be really anything. It depends upon the person. Now, the people that we work with primarily are successful, I wouldn't say businesswomen, but people who've really built up their lives, who understand the physical world, but have always been very spiritual from a very young age. But to be able to make it in the big physical world, they had to put that spiritual aspect to the side. And you can only do that for so long before it starts knocking again. And then when it starts knocking for these women, because they are so accomplished in getting things done, she really starts to come knocking. That higher version of basically the bigger woman wants to step into their lives. And what we do via a multitude of techniques and modalities, it's a whole being approach. So it's not just mental, it is the subconscious, it's the physical, the actual walking to the sacred sites, basically approaching them the way that they were supposed to. So normally you would just drive to a sacred site and then you expect something to happen. No. That's not how the ancient built these things. They were meant to be approached in a very physical manner. They were meant to be approached by walking. The very act of walking puts you into a different consciousness state. And that already makes experiences, mystical experiences, far more possible. So we have a whole being approach of both mind, subconscious mind, body, and spirit to get rid of anything that no longer serves you, that's holding you down or holding you back. It's played its part, but you need to move on. And then we install new helpful belief systems. And from there, it is teamwork. It's literally, okay, what do you want and what does she want? And by she, I mean that bigger version of you that wants to step in. And it is quite something to behold when it does. It is, it's different for every woman. But when when she makes her presence known, it is absolutely glorious. And oftentimes the women themselves are very much so scared, because there is force and power behind that thing. But also surprised, I didn't know that I had this. They have the cognitive knowing that there was more, and then an inkling of an inner feeling. But the moment that that power really starts to flow, one of the things that we do to make that happen is link all of the energetic energy centers of the bodies, the chakras, the meridians, or what I like to call the highways and byways of your being. We link everything up again so that it's fully open in communication, that there are no blockages, so things can start to flow. And when then she starts to appear in that open energy system, the power is unmistakable, and it takes people aback. So that is one level of discussing this. A completely different way of discussing this is that I left a little open little entrance there at the beginning of our conversation, Pragya, why is Ireland so special? And this also has to do with Irish mythology and how the culture of this island always saw the land, and it always saw it as a goddess. Now, one of the reasons why I think that Ireland, and this is specifically what I think, I don't know this for a fact, but what I think is that why Ireland is so large in the comments of our imagination is because the connection here to the other world, not the underworld, but the other world, is incredibly strong. And it's a very thin veil here. In Irish mythology, the modern day Irish were actually the last of 6 invading tribes. They were the last one to come here. And when they came here, they did battle with the 5th tribe, which was a tribe of demigods. They were known as the Tuatha Dé Danann, or the tribe of the goddess Danu. And Eventually, there was a pact that was made where the demigods, the Tuatha would occupy the land in the other world of Ireland, which would basically mean that they would retreat into the old fairy forts, the ring forts, the sacred stone circles, those liminal places that we've discussed, those sacred sites. They would retreat into the other world, and those ring forts and liminal places would be their access points to the above ground world where the sixth wave, the modern day Irish, would now reign supreme. And all throughout Irish history, the consciousness has always been that that veil, that link, that doorway between the two worlds, the reality that we see and the mystical other world, Tirnanog, the land of everlasting youth, or the Magmel, the plains of joy, that connection was always there. And these beings that retreated into the fairy forts, into the ring forts, into those sacred, thin-veiled sacred places, they could always connect with the Irish, and they basically became, and I'm taking some shortcuts in this story, but they basically became the fairies that we nowadays know of. So the fairies play a very big role in Ireland. Now, to wrap this all up to the whole, okay, what does this have to do with women? First up, why Ireland is so large in our common imagination is that those liminal places are absolutely everywhere in Ireland. It is not just one stone circle or one tomb. The place is littered with it. We're talking more than 200,000 archaeological sites that could be seen as these mystical gateways between our reality and the other world. 200,000 of these archaeological sites on such a small island basically means that the power of the fairies, the power of the previous inhabitants of this island, also known as the She, the power of the She is everywhere. It is intertwined with day-to-day life in Ireland. And you can still see this. Completely normal modern-day people with modern-day sensibilities, modern schedules, modern-day relationships will still not build near a fairy fort, or they will not cut down a fairy tree. They will, and there are famous examples of this, redirect highways that are being built to not go or not to have to cut down a fairy tree. This is how strong this belief still is in Ireland. So why is this land so potent? In my idea, because there are so many access points to the other world, and the power of the She, the power of the fairies, and the power of the other world is absolutely infused into physical reality here. Now, that is one section. To finish this up, and thank you for being so gracious with your time, Pragya, with letting me rant on this subject. The Irish in their ancient society very clearly made clear this is the land of the goddess, where female sovereignty reigns supreme. The Irish kings were always crowned and made their relationship, their status official by marrying and having intercourse with the land in the form of a female deity. And the female deities here are also all have connections with sovereignty. There are sovereignty goddesses here. That is another reason why on this land specifically we work with women, because this is the land of the goddess. And when you come here, if you find the right places, it really does feel like that. It has a very feminine essence to it. Like I said, I had the great opportunity to travel to places like Mother Russia. Very beautiful feeling, beautiful people. But the song of the land there is completely different. And I can only describe Ireland as incredibly feminine in the way that she feels. And I can't really explain that. It's something that you have to feel. And I think that has something to do with that the Irish always recognized this, that this is the land of the goddess, and that always what came back was that idea of sovereignty, and that it was bestowed, that sovereignty, that royal power, specifically by the feminine aspect and by the land itself. And I'm hoping that I'm making a little bit of sense here.
You surely are. And oh my God, I love how you've explained and how you've actually respected femininity and the feminine leadership, which is what I feel when it is rooted in sacred and sometimes embodied in the wisdom around. We actually look at that, differently, from striving to performative senses. And oh my God, you make so much more sense. And I love how you've explained the idea of how it has always been the land of, goddesses. And oh my God, the fairy tale mentioned. And yeah, that is actually something that I also resonate with. And I hope that the listeners, they too do, because there is so much power in each and every um, kind of human being in general. And when we talk about a woman, it's just a whole different kind of responsibility and a whole different kind of soul and strength that they carry. And I love how you respect that, and I love how you're putting it out on the forum. Also, yeah, continue.
I'm actually very open about this aspect. What we would love to see happen is that a larger part of her steps in. It doesn't always happen, but quite often it does. And what our role is again to hold the masculine aspect, to make sure that basically you give us the keys and we drive, so you don't have to think about anything, so that you can fully go into your receptivity. And in that receptivity, that's where the key is. The moment that you can open yourself up in a place where you are completely held, where you do not have to perform, where you just take time for yourself. It's not just imagine if you are taking massage or a long drawn out bath, just that little act of self-care already can do an enormous amount for yourself. Now multiply that on the spiritual, the emotional, the mental aspect for multiple days on end, where you are being taken care of, so that you no longer have to basically show up in your masculine. Somebody else is doing that for you. But instead, you can do what you are best in, and that is literally just going into your receptivity. In those kind of states, that's where magic can happen.
So true, so true, so true. And listeners, what a deeply moving conversation we've had today. This one reminds us that true change, it isn't about escaping what we are, but about meeting it with reverence. As Niels shared, the land itself can be a mirror, teaching us how to live, how to shed, and how to remember. I hope you find yourself standing at a threshold, and in I don't hope, but if you are in that threshold and in some uncertain, curious, or quietly called situation, maybe that's the beginning of your own initiation. And I hope you resonate with that and understand that. Also, take up all the insights and take up all the wisdom that Niels has shared with us today, because it was truly awesome. And the sacred, what I have understood is the sacred, it does not wait for a temple, right? It begins in your breath, in your body, in your willingness to listen, and in your willingness to work and to look into another soul and your soul with a whole different perspective for once. So until next time, may you walk gently, live consciously, and stay divinely decoded. And I would like to thank you, Niels, for such a wonderful conversation. And I'm truly, truly honored to have, had a conversation with you. And I'm so grateful.
This was fun, Pragya. Let's do it again. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Niels.